Okay, today I'm going to be talking about Taiko drawing. Now, Taiko is a music style that originated in Japan around the late Kufan period, which is when people in Japan went to Korea to understand the Kako drum. And with that, they understood it, brought it back, but adapted it to their own culture and created Taiko. Now, Taiko is very cool in that it does have traditional roots and a very traditional style, yet it can still adapt to modern contemporary music. And that's what I find, and it also adapts with Japanese culture as well, which is very cool. So with that, Japan's culture has evolved. Now, from the Kufan to the Edo to every period that's existed in Japan, it's been very traditional. Back in feudal Japan, which is when a lot of wars over territories and the shogun era sort of existed. So with that, a lot of their dress and a lot of their style were very rigid, controlled, and very precise, but also very elegant and beautiful and amazing. And now in modern Japan, they kind of follow the West in that their clothing and their style and their fashion has kind of evolved to us. Now, they're not going to be as crazy as us with a lot of our style, but they're going to look. But if you saw an American and a Japanese side by side in modern 2020, they'd look pretty similar, besides obvious things. But no, and other than that, they're pretty much different, along with their food. We Americans and Europeans and Westerners, just in general, indulge in a lot more fast food and restaurants and a lot more takeout and all that sort of stuff. Whereas Japanese enjoy going out together with people, which is called nomikai. Now, nomikai is essentially known as drinking while eating. And it's when coworkers or friends just go out to a random restaurant and they come together, they get the food, it's either prepared in front of them or they prepare it, and they eat, they drink, and they laugh. And it's very good culture because it allows you to bond closer with either workmates or colleagues or friends or even roommates. And it kind of keeps the bond together, but it also can show some signs of respect. Because Japan, since feudal Japan, has still followed the Bushido, which is known as a samurai's code of honor. But in modern Japan, it's just a standard way of showing respect. So, for example, let's say you have a high school freshman and a high school senior, in our terms. For them, it'd be 10th grader and 12th grader. So for us, they just see as a freshman and a senior. That's it. But in Japan, the 10th grader and the 12th grader see each other completely differently. The 12th grader sees the 10th grader as what's known as a kohai, which for us would mean underclassmen. And from the 10th grader to the 12th grader, that'd be seen as a senpai, which is an upperclassman. But it's also a term that shows respect. For example, sensei in Japan translates literally to teacher, but it can also be used to show respect for somebody, say, like a manga artist who is very popular and very prominent in their field. That's Bushido, which is just respect and courtesy, which is something very lacking in America. But how that influenced Taiko is that a lot of the time in traditional Taiko roots, it's like feudal Japan. For example, there's a great piece called the Etetsu Hayashi, which translates literally to fertility of the sea. And it's a very traditional piece with traditional garb and traditional instrumentation, and it's just drumming, rhythm, and tone, and it's very cool. because of modern and contemporary music being adapted into Taiko. For example, a very popular group that does something like this is called Drum Tao, and they have made amazing covers such as the Bee Gees' SOS and Panic! At the Disco's High Hopes, and they are great covers, and I highly recommend you check them out. They make very cool stuff, and it's very awesome. Now, the difference between these two is that while they use the same instruments as in Taiko, such as like a Nagata Daiko, an O Daiko, a Shime Daiko, they use the similar drums such as that. The contemporary music adds in a few more instruments. For example, they added a sitar-like instrument called a shamisen, which is a very typical string instrument that is plucked with your fingers, and it creates a very beautiful sound, and it's added in contemporary music, but it's not found too often in traditional music. And with that, Taiko has also, and that's why Taiko has evolved from classical to modern, because it has to adapt, and it has to sort of just keep on going and move forward while we adapt, because Japan is one of the most technologically advanced nations in the world, most likely. Probably on par with somebody like China, maybe Korea, and just everywhere around there. It's very advanced. It's a lot more advanced than us currently in the US. But they've evolved to match us while keeping their style, which I love personally. It's the fact that nations still take from us and show us that, like, hey, something like this actually happens, or like Japan is like, we like what they're doing, let's adapt it to us. Not saying steal as in it's exactly the same, because they still have their respect, they still have their code, but also the music that is shown through that code is very important, because a lot of the time with the music, it's very like traditional music is very rigid. It's a lot of people just hitting down, just straight, just that. It's just hitting down, going straight, and creating the sound. Whereas with the contemporary music, it's a lot more fun, relaxed, and enjoyable, which is why that's in a more social aspect for like performances and concerts, and it's a group. It's like a band in the US. It's sort of similar to that, because like we're kind of known as the creators of jazz. So it's like seeing a jazz band in the US. It's a taiko band or a taiko group, sometimes known as a kumi daiko, in Japan. But the traditional aspect is just very regimented, very controlled, because it was originally in the military for the feudal purposes, such as motivating the troops or intimidating the enemy. Now, both sides might have had this, so it depends on the type of music they most likely played, since a lot of feudal Japan was feuds of similar shoguns and such, and samurai and all that. Fighting each other for supremacy. But Taiko has evolved past that while still keeping its traditional roots, which is amazing, I personally find, because it shows that a lot can evolve and a lot can change, but it doesn't really matter how it changed. It kind of matters that it did, because as long as you show that you've adapted and you've changed and you sort of followed that path, then things become better and things become new and become interesting, and it makes people want to look, fall in love with, and try for themselves. But warning, Taiko is a very athletic sport. It requires a lot of muscle work to create the right sounds, and it's very intense. but it's a great music to listen to nonetheless. Whether you enjoy the traditional or you enjoy the contemporary, it's enjoyable. Which is sort of like Japan today, where it's evolved from what it previously was, as in feudal, but it's become better. And that's just everything you can say. If stuff becomes better, it's great. So thank you for listening to me ramble, and that has been Taiko.